Hello and welcome to the Husband Help Haven podcast, where you're going to learn how to be the best husband that you can be, no matter what your marriage is like right now. This is your host, Stephen, and today we are picking up where we left off a couple months ago, talking about major lessons that I've learned about marriage from my time coaching men through separation over the past 10 plus years. The lesson today is you have been lied to about your marriage problems. And I'm not going to keep you waiting. Here's the lie. If your marriage has the same problem over and over again, you should leave. Or in other words, unfixable marriage problems are a viable reason for divorce. Now, I'm here to tell you what's actually true is that in every marriage ever, every single one, the problems will feel largely the same across the span of the marriage. Now, stay tuned because we're gonna dive into this. I'm gonna sort of pull apart what exactly I mean when I say this. And please hear, I'll say this right up front. I am not saying that your marriage should never get better. I'm not saying that your marriage will always be hard and there's nothing you can do about it and you shouldn't want to do anything about it either. That is far from what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that the way your marriage feels when you're going through problems will feel very similar across different issues, across different problems. And actually, that's just as much because of you as it is about your spouse. Because two reasons why. First off, the things that you do that are dysfunctional or unhealthy or born out of insecurity or whatever, those are going to tend to be sort of in the same bucket. And additionally, the way that you feel when your spouse does something to you, that also is going to have a certain trend to it, a pattern to it. And these aren't necessarily there's nothing wrong inherently with it being that way. This is what I'm getting at. Because the reality is, happy marriages are not the ones that permanently fix their problems. They are the ones that successfully manage the friction that will always naturally exist when two people enter a lifelong relationship together. So here's the truth, okay? The truth is your marriage problems will be cyclical. And that means one thing above all: commitment is king. It's almost like those wedding vow things that you did on your wedding day actually had some important truth baked into them. And again, we're going to talk more as this episode goes on. We're going to talk more about sort of how to stay committed, why it matters. But first, I want to talk more about this lie. And yes, just to sort of cut to the core of it, I am saying you should stay in your marriage even when it's hard. And I know this isn't a trendy thing to say. In fact, the trend is actually the opposite. And I think fair to say that women especially are told to leave their unhappy marriages. And, again, without getting too much into it, this is Husband Help Haven. You probably aren't going to be surprised to hear me say this, but I'm going to say, generally, I do think that it's easier for a man to lead his wife into a better marriage than it is for a wife to lead her husband into a better marriage. So in a sense, I can understand and I can sympathize with a wife who feels like she's at her wit's end and that the problems are not ever feeling better. And it feels like, okay, well, what else can I do? He's never going to change. And so I have to leave. I can sympathize with that. But we're going to talk about why that is not the right approach and what is a better way of understanding how marriages get better and why things will continue to feel the same when your marriage is at a low point. So we're going to talk about that. But first, I do just want to pause, give a quick little shout out here. You may be wondering, hey, where have you been these past couple of months, Stephen? Well, I haven't just been sitting on my hands, twiddling my thumbs or anything like that. I have been putting together a new project that I'd like to just briefly tell you about, and then we'll get right back to the episode. And it is called Husband Help Group. This is a premium support group for men that are going through separation, and it's coming soon. And so I'm not going to tell you really too much more about that right now. I'm just going to say, if you're interested in something like this, go to husbandhelphaven.com/waitlist and take a look. There's a few details about the support group listed there. You can, if you'd like to have early access when I open doors just to the wait list in September, by all means, go ahead and sign up there. The public, we'll sort of make it publicly available in October. Now, okay, let's talk a little bit more about this dangerous lie that has been told and promulgated throughout the culture about marriage. Because really, I mean, even if you just think about where the idea of no-fault divorces come from, and I'm not here to say that, we shouldn't have no-fault divorces necessarily, but I will say that this premise of irreconcilable differences has been overbroadened. And it has become, it's like if you think of yourself as a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, if you think about irreconcilable differences as being a reason for divorce, then every time that you're unhappy in your marriage, you might say that's an irreconcilable difference. Every time that we have a difficulty, we might say that's an irreconcilable difference. And, the reality is that feeling frustrated or alone or hurt is not irreconcilable differences. Now, you might say, I want kids, she doesn't, or vice versa. Maybe that's an irreconcilable difference, but even there, I mean, there are couples that exist that have found a way through this. So how do they do it? Well, they reconcile the difference. That's just how it is. So again, I'm not trying to say here that your marriage should always be hard. But what I am saying is that when you have two people who enter a relationship together, what is going to happen is that those two people are going to come into the relationship with a certain set of insecurities, a certain set of unhealthy behaviors, and really even unhealthy patterns of thinking. And so you have spouse one over here and you have spouse two over here. And there's just, when they mingle together, there's going to be parts of that mingling that feel very good. Those are probably the things that attracted you to your wife or to your spouse in the first place. But there are going to be areas where those differences between you cause friction. And again, my whole point here is that those friction points in your relationship are static. They don't change because you are who you are. She is who she is. And those things are going to just be there. And so, I always like to tell this little story about a little boy from many years ago when I was doing Royal Family Kids Camp, one of the first years I did it. This was over a decade ago. And there's this little boy, and we'll just call him Johnny. Just keep it real simple. And so little Johnny was a sweet little boy, tons of fun, but throughout the week, he was a challenging child to be a counselor to. And I wasn't his counselor. I was sort of observing this from afar because he was just very, very stubborn. And he would not do anything that he didn't want to do. It was just a battle every single time. Now, again, I know sort of to a degree all kids are like this, but I mean, Johnny was he was very stubborn. And what has stuck with me is that when we were, the kids have checked out. We always do this thing at Royal Family Kids Camp. It is a Christian ministry. And so we will pray over each child after all the kids are gone, just the volunteers. And his counselor in his prayer basically said, God, I pray that as Johnny grows up, that stubbornness that we all saw throughout this week would be redirected towards stubbornness for good. Instead of selfish stubbornness, that it would be righteous stubbornness. And that has just stuck with me ever since then, because what it does is it illustrates this truth that almost every single personality strength has an accompanying personality weakness. So you might have a person who is very, very considerate, and they just are always anticipating your needs. And yet that same part of them that makes them very considerate and is thinking about what you're thinking and what you need will also, in times of trouble, cause them to be very clingy, very anxious about the relationship. And they'll need that extra reassurance that other people might not need. On the flip side, you might be, attracted to somebody because they are very independent. They're very strong. They don't need anything. They have this sort of inner resilience that just is attractive to you. And yet, in times of trouble in your relationship, that exact same trait, that part of them that makes them so strong and so independent, also makes them distant and hard to get through to in the relationship when those things need to happen. And so you can kind of see what I'm getting at here is that in a relationship, there are going to be you and your wife both have personality strengths, but you also have accompanying flaws. And those things aren't going to be removed. Not for most things. They're not going to be removed. Instead, and this starts getting into you might be asking, okay, well, Stephen, gosh, sure sounds like you're telling me I just need to sort of suck it up, buttercup, and deal with my crappy marriage. Well, no, I'm not saying that your marriage should always be hard. In fact, I promise, that even a marriage that has been hard for a very long time can get better, can get like a whole tier or two or three better than how it is. It can become beautiful and liberating and pleasing. And yes, there will be change involved to get there. So how can this be? How can it be that your problems will always feel the same and yet your marriage can get better? Well, I really think it comes down to understanding two things: self-improvement and commitment. And if we understand both of these things in their proper light, I think that it becomes clear what it looks like for a marriage to get better. Now, so let's just talk about that, okay? Hey guys, I'm going to get back to those 2 points here in just a second, but I wanted to just expand a little bit on why this truth is actually good news for your marriage, especially if you feel like there are a whole bunch of marriage problems that are present in your relationship, and they all are making you feel sort of badly in the same way. Okay, here's why this is good news, because let's just lay out what we've established. First off, you and your wife both, if your wife listening to this, you and your husband both, have insecurities and ways of coping with those insecurities that are dysfunctional, that are baked in from your childhood, that are baked in from just things that you've experienced in your life, maybe in adulthood, but one way or another, you have, in short, baggage. And the way that that baggage rubs up against the baggage of your spouse is going to result in feelings, in the same sort of feelings every time. Okay, so far so good. So why, in a sense, you could be pessimistic and say, well, gosh, Stephen, it sounds like you're telling me our marriage problems are always going to feel this way. Well, here's why this is actually good news, because the optimistic take is if we can learn to manage that baggage properly, and if we can think rightly about how to do self-improvement well, which we're going to get into in just a moment, well, then what that actually means is that all of this sort of wide swath of marriage problems, suddenly, many of them just disappear because we've learned to recognize like what problems our insecurities and our sort of dysfunctions cause, right? But then the ones that are still there, you have a bad day here or there, because you have self-awareness, because you have a right way of thinking of self-improvement and sort of being your best self, now they are less consequential. They don't feel as bad. And the bad feelings that are still there are overcome much more quickly, and they're healed more actually. So this is why it's good news, because if there is this common sort of corrupt root beneath how badly all of your different problems feel, the ever presence of that corrupt root is somewhat discouraging, but it's also just true. The good news is if we can address that corrupt root well, suddenly all of these problems feel better. So take that as you will. Let's keep listening. Just wanted to jump in there. Sorry for the interruption. So let's talk about commitment. I think there's two ways to think about commitment. There's a guy, a guru online. His name is Alex Hormozi. You may have heard of him. He's big on YouTube. He has defined commitment, and I'm sure it's actually not his definition, but he's where I heard it from, so he's going to get the credit here, which is commitment is a pledge to yourself to remove the other options that come up. And so when you're committed, you're saying, as I go through this commitment, there might be other alternatives, other opportunities that creep in to my field of view. And I am going to, my pledge is, I'm going to cut those options off. I'm not going to entertain them. I'm going to stay tunnel visioned on this path in front of me. This is the thing I'm committed to. Now, I personally would define commitment similar, but a little bit differently, which is that a commitment is a present tense decision to do what you've decided you would do in the past, whether you feel like it or not. So when you commit to something, when on your wedding day, when you were saying your vows, you said in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, for better or for worse. What you're doing there is you are making a promise as you sit here that in the future, when you don't feel like holding that promise anymore, you'll do it anyways. That's the commitment. That's the promise part. And ultimately, this promise is beneath every marriage. It's what makes marriage special. It's what makes it's more than just a legal document. It's not built on fairness. It's not built on affection or on happiness even. It's built on a promise. And really, even just that word betrothed, like when you're betrothed, your wife is betrothed to you, you're betrothed to your wife, whatever, that the etymology of that word is thoroughly promised. That's what you can think of betrothed meaning. It is thoroughly promised. So when you enter into marriage, you have entered into a relationship that is forged on a promise in love to keep your heart faithful to the person whom you betrothed. And every promise entails commitment. Now, why do we even need this commitment? Now, again, in those wedding vows, the sort of stereotypical wedding vows, yes, it's for richer and for poorer, okay? It's in the sickness and in the health, okay? It's for better or for worse. But really, all of those things are speaking to your feelings. Feelings are the reason that we need commitment. Because, and you heard it sort of in my definition of commitment, your feelings will wage war against your commitment. Because feelings, they're these tricky little things called feelings, when you're experiencing them, they always tell you that they're permanent, even though they're not. Feelings are by definition reactive to an experience. And yet the sensation of having a feeling almost always, especially if it's a negative feeling, if it's a bad feeling, feels permanent. And it doesn't help when you might repeat, you might, cycle through that feeling many times over. And it might feel like there's actually some truth to its permanence. And yet still, I will tell you, your feelings can change. When your circumstances get better, when your marriage improves, when you sort of work your way through some of these dynamics and improve them, then your marriage will change and your feelings will change too. Now, that brings us to the next point, the next thing that you have to understand. We talked about commitment. The other thing that we need to really get clarity about to work against this lie that your marriage problems should be fixed, and if they can't be fixed, then you should leave. That's the lie. What we need to do is we need to recognize what self-improvement is. Because it's not that change is impossible. That is not what I'm saying here. But what I am saying is that you need to understand the type of change that is possible and the type that isn't. Because often we sort of have this fundamental misunderstanding of what self-improvement looks like or what sort of change should be expected in a relationship. Because the reality is, self-improvement and showing up better in your marriage is not about changing who you are. It's actually about learning who you are. It's about gaining self-awareness. It's about acknowledging your strengths and your weaknesses equally. It's a choice of contentment plus a choice of action. So again, like if we go back to little Johnny, he might be an excellent, strong and independent person in his marriage. And he will maybe do some very good things in his relationship. And yet in those conflicts, he's going to be very stubborn. And so what does he need to do? Well, what he needs to do is he needs to learn to play up those strengths, lean into them more, but also learn how his weaknesses can affect his partner in his marriage when he's having a conflict. So your weaknesses, in some sense, are baked in. And yet, by learning what they are, remember the two ways that we said at the start that you are going to contribute to your own unhappiness in your marriage? It's because both the things that you do might be dysfunctional and the things that you feel might be born out of a dysfunctional or an untruthful perspective. You're going to have sensitivities and you're going to have bad habits, basically, is what I'm getting at. And these things are going to play together along with your spouse's sensitivities and bad habits to create marriage problems that feel the same, even when they're on totally different subject matters. It might be something about, hey, we got the wrong groceries at the store. That's a fight. That's a problem over here. Hey, we disagree over how we're going to parent our child through this difficult thing. Okay, that's a difficulty over here. Hey, I'm not sure what we should, but the through line through like the way that you feel in both of these might be very similar. The complaint that is leveled against the husband or the wife in these two different problems might be the same. Oh, you never listen to me. Oh, I shouldn't have to tell you this 10 times over. Whatever, right? So what needs to happen here is that both spouses really ought to spend some time learning what their sensitivities are. What are you oversensitive to? What do you feel when you get triggered, to use a nice recognizable word? And additionally, what do you need to do differently? And my contention would be that as you learn more, as you gain self-awareness, your self-improvement will come through managing and mitigating the effect of your weaknesses, taking greater responsibility that they are your weaknesses, and also leaning harder into your strengths so that they have a stronger presence in your relationship than your weaknesses do. But again, to be clear, the expectation is not that the fundamental strengths and weaknesses that you have as a person change. It's that they're managed so that you can feel much happier. You can have much more hope in your marriage. But at the same time, when you go through a season of discontentment, the way that discontentment feels will probably be the same. And you need to learn that that's as much about you as it is about your spouse. Okay, now let's just talk very briefly, because I know that there are going to be some people listening to this who might say, well, gosh, okay, Stephen, but it sounds like you're excusing bad behavior. It sounds like you're saying that, like, let's just use the worst case example of like a wife who's in an abusive marriage. Like, should she really just stay committed to the marriage? And just first off, like, no, you're allowed to have boundaries, okay? And so I'm just, what's worth saying, commitment is not the whole answer. And there is self-improvement that really needs a third party to be accomplished well. And there are some, there are habits, there are behaviors that really do damage a marriage and perhaps even make it untenable. So I'm not telling you that you should suffer unlimited bad behavior. I will say boundaries do have a place, and we will talk about boundaries in a future episode. But at the same time, I think that the vast majority of people who get divorced are not suffering these really, really bad, abuse and in those category of behaviors, things in their marriage. They're just not. It's much more common for, at least among my clients, it's much, much more common for it to just be this sort of generic unhappiness, oftentimes paired with some mental health issues. On both sides, really, and that can create a relationship that feels like it can't be fixed. But again, I think part of it too is having this false expectation of what fixing marriage problems should look like. So here's the reality: every single marriage, even the ones that have made it all the way to the end, all the way to the deathbed, both of my grandparents, so my mom's parents and my dad's parents, both had lifelong marriages. And and if you were to talk to them in their 80s or their 90s, respectively, they both lived nice long lives. They looked like the exact dream come true of what you'd hope for in a marriage. They made it, and they enjoyed it. And yet I know that in both marriages, there were seasons that were incredibly difficult. And there were problems that felt unfixable for a season or multiple seasons. And yet, the commitment that they held to was worth it. And that's the whole point of commitment, right? It's that it sees you through to the fruition of what a marriage can be. And if you want that sort of dream marriage where you are into your old age and you are enjoying having made it and sort of surrounded by your loved ones and enjoying sort of all of these things that come in that season, it takes staying through the hard seasons. Um, and so I can pretty much promise you, I mean, think of the happiest marriage that you know, just from the outside looking in, what marriage looks the happiest. I can virtually guarantee you that if you were to sit down with one spouse or the other, you would hear or see or learn about the difficulties that they have experienced. So, okay, I hope that you are hearing this. I am not looking to excuse bad behavior, and nor am I looking to excuse complacency or stagnation. I often get sort of sometimes I'll have guys give me a little bit of a hard time. Why is it only that I should change? And that is because I harp on, guys, do better. Let's as a whole gender, let's just be better. I want husbands to do better. I want wives to be better too. But this is Husband Help Haven. I talk to husbands, right? And so I'm going to say, absolutely, your problems should be managed. Your weaknesses should be managed. And yet, everybody needs to understand that the solution isn't that weaknesses should be eliminated entirely. It's that they should be managed. And even when those weaknesses come with bad behaviors that really cannot be permitted to continue, you have the drug addict, you have the alcoholic, you have the abuser, whatever, fill in the blank, where there's these behaviors that go with the weaknesses that are very, very unsafe. And so they cannot be permitted to continue. Even then, what's really happening is that the weaknesses that make those things happen in the first place are brought under control. The self-awareness is increased. The understanding of the consequences is increased. So take that as you will. I hope that you hear this is not a license for bad behavior. Instead, what it is it is an urgent plea for you to embrace the objective good of committing to your marriage. And if you are separated and you are listening to this and you are the only one holding on to that commitment, what I want to tell you is keep going. Keep going. Don't give up. It will be worth pushing through, no matter how things end up. Because guess what? The person that you show yourself to be through this process, you got to keep that person no matter what. The sort of man that you demonstrate yourself to be, that man stays with you. And a man who can hold to his commitment even when he doesn't feel like it, again, I'll say, maybe there's a strong statement, I'll say he's just objectively better than one who can't. Will have a greater impact on the world around him than one who can't. And there's this Andy Stanley quote that I often think about that I really like, and again, not a wholehearted endorsement of Andy Stanley, but he does have this quote, and it says, the value of a life is not measured by the things that you gain. It's measured by the things you give away. Things not being physical things necessarily, but what you give away is what adds value to your life. And that includes giving away your time in the name of commitment, giving away seasons of your life, trying to save your marriage. This is, again, and it might be hard to see it now, but this adds value to your life in the long run. And so to everybody listening to this, I want to say, hold on to the promise that you made to your spouse, to your wife, or to your husband, for better or for worse, and persevere in hope and love. Seek to grow, seek to change, recognizing that the direction of that change is going to be lowering down your weaknesses and building up your strengths. And as you do this, the world around you will be changed. And when you feel friction in your marriage, if you are listening to this and you are in an unhappy marriage and you have been considering separation or divorce, I would just urge you to recognize that in some sense, it's okay. It's okay to be in a marriage that feels like the same problems are happening over and over again. It is not proof that you can never be happy. It is not proof that you made a mistake in who you married. It's not proof that your marriage is unfixable and doomed to be miserable for all time. Absolutely none of those things. It's just proof that you and your spouse are both two flawed people. And the nature of those flaws just aren't going to change that much over time. Instead, what will happen, though, is that those flaws are shrunk down. They're made smaller. And the strengths and the contributions will go up. So, I hope that that's worth something to you. I hope that that's some encouragement to you. And yeah, I think this is just a message that has been on my heart, and I think it's something that I've seen really contribute to the breakdown of a lot of marriages, is buying into this lie that, like, gosh, if our marriage problems aren't being fixed, if things continue to feel the same, even if the problems themselves are fixed, but the feelings sort of stay there, gosh, that must be proof that we need to leave the marriage. And I say, no, your marriage problems will be cyclical. I hit my mic there. Your marriage problems will be cyclical. The way they feel will be the same over here as it is over here. And that can make you feel like it's doomed, but it's not. It's just that's how it is in a relationship. And so that's why we need commitment. Commitment is the thing that bridges the gap from the unhappy seasons to the happy seasons. And so hold on to that commitment. It is worth it. Now, one more time, guys, I will tell you, if you want to, first off, if you want to go and see an overview of this episode, an outline of the stuff that we talked about here, go over to husbandhelphaven.com/episode -27. This is episode 27. So it's episode -27 right after husbandhelphaven.com. And yeah, as I said, we are gearing up to open doors to a brand new support group for men going through separation, built on the Husband Help Haven ethos, pro-marriage, pro-hope. Not going to be bashing wives or anything like this in there. It is just a place for men who are serious about doing better and seeing their way through their marriage crisis as well as it can be sawn through. I don't know. That's going to be what this group is for. So if you're interested, husbandhelphaven.com/waitlist, hop on over there. Either way, guys, thank you for listening. We will be back next week to talk about another sort of confusion, a little tension point that I want to try and untangle for you. So I won't say too much more about it right now, but stay tuned. All right, guys. This has been Steven. Thank you for listening. I will sign off with much manly love. See you guys.